The Me Too movement exploded 1 year ago today with the first accusations made against Hollywood mogul Harvey Weinstein. Since then, dozens of powerful men have faced accusations of sexual harassment and misconduct. Here's a look back at the past 12 months. Actor Ashley Judd accused Weinstein in a New York Times story published on October 5th, 2017. Dozens of women have since come forward with allegations against him. A few weeks later, actor Kevin Spacey was accused of making unwanted advances on a young actor. Allegations from other men surfaced soon after. Spacey was dropped from his Netflix show House of Cards. In November, The Washington Post published a story alleging Alabama Senate candidate Roy Moore preyed on underage girls decades ago. Moore later lost to a Democrat. NBC fired Today Show host Matt Lauer in late November. The network said a number of women working there complained about his behavior. Then last January, former U.S. gymnastics coach Larry Nassar was sentenced for sexually assaulting athletes, including minors. 156 women read victim impact statements during the sentencing hearing, including some well-known U.S. gymnasts. In April, Bill Cosby was convicted for sexually assaulting Canadian Andrea Constand in 2004. Last month, he was sentenced to prison. Last month, CBS CEO Les Moonves resigned after a number of women accused him of harassment and misconduct. And on September 16th, Christine Blasey Ford accused Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh of sexually assaulting her when they were teenagers. For more on what has happened in the past 12 months and what to watch for in the future, I'm joined by attorney Laura Noble. She works with the Time's Up Legal Defense Fund and is in Raleigh, North Carolina. So Laura, how far has this movement gone in your opinion? Are we still at the beginning?
Well, that's an excellent question, and thank you for having me. I'm delighted to talk about this with you today. That was quite a litany you went through of famous individuals who've been accused of sexual harassment. What we're seeing is some positive movement for women in terms of speaking out and feeling more confident that they're going to be heard and that there's going to be some supportive community for them. However, for most people, they're not being sexually harassed by someone who's famous. So there's still a lot of work to be done in this area.
And what's your take on some of the negative responses and attitudes felt towards the Me Too movement, including the president mocking Brett Kavanaugh's accuser, Dr. Ford?
Well, unfortunately, we have heard from some of our jury consultants and other lawyers that there is this negative perception that the movement perhaps has gone too far. And given that these cases really started to get filed about a year ago, we're probably not going to see verdicts on these for another year, year and a half. And I think those verdicts will be very telling in terms of where the public perception is. But what we're hoping for is that we can create, outside of all the partisanship, that we can create a climate where sexual harassment victims feel like they can come forward and they can be heard. And yes, that process needs to include a neutral fact finder and no leaping to conclusions, but a place where we can voice the allegations, reach some conclusions under some evidentiary standard, and then move forward based on what we've discovered.
Could Judge Kavanaugh's impending confirmation be seen as a setback to the movement?
Well, I think that the Kavanaugh hearings are already being viewed by such a political prism, being viewed through this political prism. I think if you're a conservative, you think that alleged victims can lie or they can fail to remember things, and this can ruin a good man's life. If you're liberal, you think that the majority of victims hesitate to come forward because they have nothing to gain except justice, and they have everything to lose. So regardless of the confirmation result, I think it's going to cement people's views about this issue. But if we can work past this and look towards a bipartisan solution about creating a climate where people feel that the facts are going to be evaluated neutrally and fairly, and that victims are going to be respected and heard, I think this will continue to benefit all of us, and the Me Too movement, I think, will be instrumental in that process.
Are you hopeful about that, given what we've seen over the past week?
Well, it is disappointing that Dr. Ford, who is an accomplished professional, a very educated woman, has had her motives, memory, and mental health even questioned. That is disappointing. Not surprising, given what we've seen that happens in the workplace every day to women who are accusing people who aren't famous. That's typically what happens. But I do remain hopeful because I also see so many people coming together and joining in protests and speaking out in ways that didn't happen, for example, in the Clarence Thomas, Anita Hill hearings. So I am encouraged by that.
Where do you see this movement, the Me Too movement, going in the next few years?
Well, I'll tell you where I'd like it to go. So what's been the most frustrating for those of us who work in this area is that we expected to see a swift legislative response to this outpouring of Me Too movement, the victims coming forward. And instead, there's been very little movement on the legislative front. Some states have sort of changed some things around training and awareness, very much on the margins. But what really needs to happen is a fundamental revision of our federal law, Title VII, that governs this, and a new look at the state laws, particularly those states where they don't have any laws at all protecting people from sexual harassment at work.
Laura, I appreciate you taking the time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Laura Noble in Raleigh, North Carolina. She is a lawyer who also works with the Time's Up Legal Defense Fund.